up until a few years ago, game UIs used to look cool. This is Colin McRae Rally 2.0. It's one of the first games I've ever played, and alongside being a pretty good arcade rally racer, it's what got me into Acid House. So I wanted to have some music from the game here because it's as integral as the game UI for the vibe of the game, but it's Content ID claimed and also apparently very popular in Polish cooking videos. Here's me jamming something that kinda sounds like it just to give you an idea. This is like the first thing you see when you boot the game. It changed my brain chemistry forever. Most importantly though, it's got what I think is the best game UI of all time. It's extremely clean but not too minimal. It's functional but not overcrowded. Nothing feels janky, nothing feels out of place. You can very effortlessly just go through the whole menu and start a race without even thinking about what you're doing. But if you stop for a second and take a look at what's on screen, you'll notice so many small bespoke details everywhere in the game. The very first thing you see in the game is this language select screen, which is a flag made of dust that change color and wave and have a shimmer. And right after that, we get to this menu with different icons representing what you're selecting. But they are not simple icons or PNGs. They're actually the letters Colin McRae taking a different shape on the fly as you change options. And they also have this small sparkle right here trying to represent cars racing, I think. The player select screen is also yet another unique design. The driver name input select screen has this slot machine effect when you're selecting letters. Absolutely every design element here is designed to be cool, unique, but never get in the way, never be overwhelming. And right after this game, they kept doing that. Colin McRae Rally 2003, 2004, 2005, all of them have cool looking, functional, interesting UIs. And one a big reason for this was that Codemasters back then was truly at their peak. The reality of things is that for quite a while, unique game UIs were the norm. Okay, I'm sorry for the weird angle and lighting. I'm recording this from my editing room because I specifically did not want to plan this beforehand to try and prove something. Recently, I bought this lot of like random discs, random games, and among them, I did get a lot of demos. I just put a random demo disc in.
Ooh.
Okay, try to guess what comes after this. Because as someone who has only ever played European demos, I could never see this coming. So apparently your discs, your American PS1 demo discs have commercials in them. Is this a custom intro?
They used the wrong font.
If you try to play any demo disc for any console now, what you'll notice is that
It's doing some Banjo-Kazooie shit. It is doing some Banjo-Kazooie shit.
there used to be so much more variety. Not only in game UIs,
Wow, okay.
but also between everything around games.
Dude, Europeans.
Rotating computers.
They got
What?
lighting balls.
Imagine getting your kid this disc for the Teletubbies demos and then suddenly body bags.
I wonder how much Truth paid them to put that in there.
This autoplays when you boot the disc, oh my god. So much care was put even in the smaller details. Okay, one last disc. I want to put this Codemasters American demo. I want to see if there's anything overly American here. Let's go, let's fucking go! I've seen more variety in 1 hour of playing demos with my friend on Discord than in the past few years playing any mainstream games. So what the fuck happened to creativity in presentation in gaming or something? I don't know. By the way, for reasons that will become apparent later in the video, we are not beeping swears today. So if you're personally offended by this, you can send an email to someone you love, I don't know. So when I started having this idea that UIs were getting more and more similar, I tried to find some scientific research about it, and I found the IU Computer Vision Lab here, which has done a lot of research on how much web design has changed, and by using computer vision, they were able to compare different websites at different points in time, and then compare all of them together. And quoting their article published on theconversation.com, the average differences between websites peaked between 2008 and 2010, and then decreased between 2010 and 2016. So we do have real proof that stuff started looking the same around tech. Okay, it's not games, we'll get to games later. You should definitely check out the research on your own. There are several articles and talk. They were even able to track how websites like Yahoo used to look like MSN until 2006, and then they started looking more and more similar to Apple. I wonder why. Rest in peace, Flash, alongside Freehand and Fireworks, and I could keep going there, but I want to tell you about my theory, which is that games went through a similar trajectory. Now, I couldn't find any specific computer vision research about video game UIs throughout eras, and I definitely want to try to do that myself one day, but I have my own personal theory about mainstream video games. So if you're making Catboy Adventures on RPG Maker XP, that doesn't count, okay? My theory is that from 1994 to 2013, mainstream games used to have a way more original presentation. Now, that didn't always mean good, but even among the same saga, you had games with a radically different identity coming out basically every year.
pony. Boy.
What you're looking at right now is the UI of Need for Speed Prospect. We're not talking about some art house indie game, we're talking about a rushed, yearly release AAA game, which was received quite poorly when it came out and only really got cult classic status a few years ago. But if you look at the menus, look at the UI, look at the vibe of the game, it's so unique. People like me that never got to play this game when they were a kid, they have no nostalgia for it, are going back, installing it and playing it. And you might wonder why? Why, if there are way better games when it comes to graphics, to the driving model, to the physics, why would you go back and play a broken 2007 game if it's not even something nostalgic for you? And I really think a big part of this is how everything around the gameplay makes you feel. The UI, the fonts, the style of the animations between races, everything is designed to make it feel like an exaggerated version of a track day in the late 2000s. Some people love how this game looks, some people hate it. But that's kind of the point. The structure of a lot of racing games is pretty much the same. And so they are kind of the perfect example to showcase how much impact the style of a game, the UI of a game, can have on you and how you perceive it. When I started writing this video more than a year ago, I wanted to make sure that what I'm describing here, this flattening of UIs and artwork and presentation, was real and not just something that was a byproduct of me getting older and being nostalgic. Ironically, I started thinking about this when I was playing Mirror's Edge, which is a game with minimal UI, but what I think is the best art direction I've ever seen in a game. If I didn't know it, I would never say this game was running on Unreal Engine 3 and was made in 2008. I was kind of starved for something unique from the mainstream crowd. And so I did something I don't usually do. I played a AAA game at launch knowing nothing about it. I decided to play Black Ops 6. And it broke me to the point where I had to make this video, and so I started writing it. There's an ongoing debate, there's been for like 10 years, about whether games can be considered art. And while on the affirmative camp you have games like Deus Ex reminding us why games can be art,
you will soon have your god, and you will make it with your own hands.
Yeah, maybe gifting this to some wasn't a good idea after all. Black Ops 6 to me feels like gaming squeezed out of a tube. There's no menu for the game, there is a Call of Duty app and you have to access the game from there. And before you do that, you have to sign your life away to Activision. And by that I mean sign the terms of service. The campaign itself, when it comes to the gameplay, is fine. It's what I expect from a Call of Duty. The last Call of Duty I played was the first version of Black Ops 2, not the remake. It's a solid game, it's what you expect. But I'm here to evaluate the presentation, and that feels the same as 10 years ago. The HUD, the menus have barely evolved, except now we don't have a main menu anymore. We have this Office 365 looking ass. You know what we do have though? In a game that, according to my Google search right now, costs around $450 million at least in development costs. Take a look at this very boring game menu screenshot and tell me if something looks wrong. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 fingers. It's fucking AI! During my break, I switched to a 32-bit float audio interface and it's weird to hear no clipping when I scream. Now when I want it, I have to add it in post. There we go! Disclaimer, by the way, I'm not against AI in this case because AI is bad in a religious-like way. No, I'm against AI when it's used as a tool to lazily replace artists when you have all the fucking money in the world. Look, I'm not expecting Call of Duty to be the most artful game ever or some sort of intimate story about a soldier, even though I have to say that it did used to be a disruptive series. COD 4 changed everything. Black Ops was fucking awesome, but having a super high budget and putting literally no effort into anything when it comes to presentation, not even paying real human artists when you have this high of a budget for a game, it makes me feel like you're not respecting the people playing your games. That said, when you're barely respecting the people working on your games, maybe something's rotten, something needs to change. So in my life, I do and I've done a lot of stuff, but I've never been a game developer. And so since we're talking about a complex topic like this one, I thought that it would be fair to reach out to some game devs and ask them, why are you guys not making cool UIs anymore? And I've mostly focused my efforts into asking people who directly or indirectly work for huge companies making AAA games. Some of them were Americans directly working for said companies, while others were contract workers working from Eastern Europe, from some developing countries in Asia, so people from all walks of life. We are talking about a huge industry, and I think that's key to try to understand the trends a bit. Even though the game industry is kind of on fire right now, indie developers are, I won't say immune, but shielded from being bound by the balls to market whims. So if you're an indie developer making the coolest retro FPS I've ever seen, or you're an illustrator making a neat girl dating simulator, or an independent team trying to make a super realistic soft body physics model, accidentally spawning one of the best games ever, there's always space for you doing whatever the fuck you want, including with your UI. And that's why I wanted to mostly hear from the expendables, the cannon fodder, the people who work for companies that do not give two shits about them. They just want a job to be done, and I would be happy to replace them with AI, even though that's really not going well, is it? So what these developers told me when asked like why every game now looks the same UI-wise and vibes-wise, some of them focused on the technical aspects, on the problems that companies now know they might have to go through if they try to do something more unique. I'm gonna keep everyone anonymous here except one person which straight up told me I could name them without any issues, and that's Silent, which you might know for making so many old games work again. He's been on all sides of the game development world. He told me straight up that you want your UI to scale to different resolutions, aspect ratios, look good on a computer and TV, work with a keyboard and gamepad. All those fancy heavy UIs are an absolute bitch to make work in widescreen, for example. Games now take so long to make, you can't make mistakes. And so from a technical side, what we hear is totally understandable. The stakes are higher than ever, games are way bigger than ever before. More and more people work on a single game, they take years to make. A fancy UI might look cool, but it's a big problem if it starts breaking everything. That's also why every single AAA and AA game pretty much uses the same 3 game engines. When so much money gets spent on developing a game, minimizing any potential failure is key. There's a pretty screwed up reason why, out of all the people that I talked to for the making of this video, I can only name Silent, except for like us being friends for a while now. He was the only person that strictly told me about technical stuff. Everyone else, as I moved along with the discussion, asking them why there's a lack of creativity in the industry, stopped sounding like a normal professional just having an happy life and telling me about their constraints in this industry, and more like a whistleblower. We all know that the gaming industry is not doing well. We keep hearing about layoffs. Just today, I have this news here. Ubisoft halted the trading of their shares, and a few days ago, Rockstar decided to fire a bunch of people, allegedly union busting, and delayed Grand Theft Auto 6 by yet another few months. So we hear this stuff so often, and we've been hearing it for so long now that it's almost become normal. Like, we've become almost desensitized to it. And we sort of start thinking about the gaming industry as one that is inherently risky. And when you don't know whether you're going to be working for the same company you're working today in a few months, and when every bold choice you make can be used against you to lay you off when needed as an excuse, why would you ever risk not being able to pay for your rent just to experiment creatively? There is no environment in which creativity can blossom right now. What you're currently watching is the music video for the song Juiced by British rapper Shisty. Now, the reason I know this song is that it was the music video tie-in intro for a game that I played when I was a kid, Juiced. And so the plot twist is that I bought this game again a few years ago, and not only the intro music was not there, the game was completely different. If you have any video game magazines from 2004, you might find reviews for this game that I just mentioned, okay? It's not like I dreamed it up. Here I have the August 2004 number of Australian PlayStation Magazine, and they're mentioning this intro. They're mentioning the game as I remember it. So what's going on? Well, Just is developed in 2004 by Just Games. I wonder why they have such a specific name. And it's going to be released by their parent company Acclaim in the fall of 2004. Press copies are sent over to magazines, so we have the reviews, everything is ready, and then Acclaim goes bankrupt, and so the game never comes out. Damn, I wonder how the people behind BMX XXX went bankrupt. 1 year later, THQ buys all of the assets from Acclaim and basically tells Just Games, you got one last chance, rework this or die, and that's the game that we have actually got on the shelves. What I played as a kid was the finished unreleased Acclaim version though, which somehow leaked from the press and got installed on a lot of Xboxes around Europe. Of course, when I say installed on several Xboxes, you know what I mean, right? But it could be worse. way worse. Juice Games was originally known as Rage Games Warrington. They were well known for their critically acclaimed Lamborghini licensed title for the Xbox, which never came out. It was finished, sent to the press, who gave it pretty good reviews, and then Rage went bankrupt, so the game actually never hit the shelves. Juice Games was specifically a reformation of the previous team, this time to try and work under a claim to be maybe safer. Nope, they still got to waste years of their work. I can't blame these people for maybe deciding to phone it in once or twice in the future. Maybe not that kind of phone call though. Rage Software had this happen to them more than 20 years ago, and things only got worse ever since. Why would you go the extra mile building something super unique when you could just be laid off out of the blue, lose every right over what you worked on till now, depending on how fucked up the contract you signed was? Or even if you don't get fired, your project, like a lot of projects every year inside these major companies, might be cancelled, even when it's basically done. And even when your project is not only successful, it's one of the best games of the year, you still might get fucked by the company you're working for. Just ask people who worked on Rollerdrome, the team got shut down. Or Hi-Fi Rush, also shut down. And that game was the single reason why I kept paying for Game Pass from Microsoft. Colin McRae Rally 2.0, the game that I showed at the beginning of this video, was actually made by Codemasters, which was acquired by EA in 2021 and given one chance to make a rally game with their WRC, and then they've been officially shut down this year. Technically speaking, they've been turned into a support studio, but that's also what they did to Criterion, so they might as well be dead. In my opinion, cool game UIs are a sign of a healthy, competitive environment where companies are still trying to innovate, getting you to pay attention by actually putting in the work, making cool stuff, which is not where we are right now. Right now, consumers are taken for granted, and workers on average get treated like replaceable cogs. These two things, I think, are leading to a lower and lower standard in quality of games, consumer rights, and it's scary how fast you can get used to stuff like this, because you'd think that if you started having to pay more to get less or get the same stuff you were getting last year for free, you would notice. Except here, you're the boiling frog. When I was in elementary school, the Xbox 360 versus PS3 console war was raging, and I remember taking the side of the Xbox 360 because it felt like a more attainable future. It didn't feel like I had to sell my left kidney to get one, it felt like a console for average people, and I was truly shocked by how innovative everything looked and felt. But I also remember it felt to me and lots of other people that the truly unique dashboard and presentation were just a way to sell you Xbox Live Gold. The second you bought the console, Microsoft was already trying to upsell you, and I remember that feeling not great, to put it mildly. Xbox Live had been sold since 2002 as a revolution. We finally had a robust online system that Microsoft was running that made online gaming on consoles easy and reliable. But beyond the commercials, beyond the marketing, what Microsoft was really selling with Xbox Live was just peer-to-peer multiplayer gaming, something that used to be free on every other platform. Historically, the only other company that tried to do something like that was Sega, with SegaNet, which failed so miserably, and that was made in collaboration with Microsoft, which maybe allegedly ended up stealing some of their ideas, something that maybe also helped kill the Dreamcast, convincing them to leave the console market forever. If there's one thing you have to keep in mind throughout this video, is that you shouldn't root for any company at all. Like, they're not your friends, okay? As you see time and time again, every company you can think of is ready to throw you under the bus for a quick buck.
Well, it's been a month since video gamers stormed the stores to get their hands on Halo 3. The game was September's top seller, with 3.3 million copies flying off the shelves, more than twice as many as the 9 runners-up combined.
I don't think most people remember how controversial it was to be forced to have to pay for Xbox Live if you wanted to play online at first. Since the very beginning on the first Xbox, and way more on the Xbox 360, Microsoft started giving out as many free codes for Xbox Live as possible. It reminds me of when Google gave free drive, 2 terabytes I think, to every student in my uni, no questions asked, and then a few years later wanted us to pay to keep all of our data stored in their cloud. Which for me personally was a great moment to learn how to build my own NAS. This looks like a fire hazard. Maybe it is. But in actuality, I am in the minority. A lot of people just started paying for Drive on their own and kept their stuff there. If you can slowly get someone to accept that something has value and without rushing it, make them almost depend on your system, they're gonna start paying for it when you stop gifting it to them. You need to have a load of money in the bank to make this work, because you're gonna lose a lot of money at first, but you know who we're talking about right now, so they do have the money. There's a quote that I remember from Disclaimer, I am not endorsing this person. Curzio Malaparte, we had to study him in college because he was Mussolini's propagandist. He was talking about Naples, which I still have to visit. And I know that by saying this, I will summon like 10,000 Italians in the comments. He said something like, it's the destiny of Europe to become Naples. Now, I don't know what he meant with this, but I just want to steal his sentence, which I don't really feel bad doing, to say that it's the destiny of the gaming industry to turn into Xbox Live. And actually, I think it's too late to go back right now.
Introducing Xbox One.
This moment right here, the Xbox One announcement, is still remembered as one of the worst flops in gaming. Okay, Microsoft tried to force people into having an always online console to make sure you're not hiding any enemies of the state under your floorboards. I mean, you weren't playing any used games. As the story goes, Sony joined and mocked them and made a video about sharing PS4 games, which showed that the PS4 was still able to play used games, and therefore Microsoft for years desperately had to try winning back gamers' hearts with uncharacteristically consumer-friendly moves like walking back on the used games thing, letting you play your games from the Xbox and Xbox 360 from your discs, even on the Xbox One and Series X without having to buy them again. Play Anywhere, Xbox Game Pass, which combined with them acquiring pretty much every game studio they can, is definitely not going to have any repercussions on the market, right? Sony, any comments on this? Well, what I told you right now is not a lie. However, I did try to make it look a certain way. Before I reveal what I'm talking about, let me ask you one question. Do you think the average gamer right now has more or less consumer rights compared to the Xbox 360 era? Let me go back for a second here. Do you see that text right there on screen? Sony tried to portray themselves as heroes while also copying Xbox Live and forcing everyone into having to pay for online. From 2017, after you know what, Nintendo also started doing the same, and right now you have to pay a monthly fee to play online on every single game console on the market. There are exceptions for free-to-play games like Fortnite, but I want you to notice what used to be something weird a few years ago is now normal, and people don't even complain about it anymore. And Microsoft, owning so many game companies now, has gained such control on the software side. They're selling their software on rivals' consoles, and they're basically ignoring what the Xbox brand was almost completely. I do think Game Pass was the ultimate deal with the devil, because when things were going well, it used to be a pretty great deal, but now we're stuck with rising prices and with worse games, and you end up paying monthly with the illusion of choice. You access a system that is prioritizing quantity over quality, and where one entity owns pretty much everything and can control everything, and so your opinion matters less and less. I'd rather be able to vote with my wallet, buying the games I like and not buying the games that let me down, because that way I can directly affect how a company has to operate if they want to keep seeing my cash. When I was a kid, it felt unusual that the Xbox 360 was trying to constantly sell me something, even though I already bought the console, I already bought the games. It's like that on every console now. I used to be able to turn on my Wii and spend hours on the channels that Nintendo made freely available for everyone, each one of them with a unique UI, unique music. The system menu looks so unique too. I could go on the Wii shop and buy Super Mario Bros. 3, now they make me endlessly rent it. When I was broke, I used to go on the Wii shop and browse for all Nintendo games and just listen to the music, enjoy the vibes. And I know it's not me being nostalgic. Not only that music is still used today, completely out of context, but way back then, actual music was written about the Wii shop vibe. Try checking out the Switch shop or the console menu. Companies don't need to wow us anymore. And the music is gone. Jeez, Femi, why are you so dramatic? Can't you spend like $5 a month? Why all of this? How is it connected to your eyes? Come on. Since I was a kid, I heard people talk about the imminent or supposed imminent death of gaming. Sometimes it was Nintendo making the Wii and therefore abandoning real gamers. Or, for example, I remember when people were saying Nintendo would be dead because of the Wii U. This didn't go as expected. Competition and sometimes desperation are the two main things that make a company constantly innovate to try and reach more people, or any people. The Wii U had so many problems, but innovation ain't one. Nintendo was firing on all cylinders, and the fact that the Switch library is mostly made of games originally made for the Wii U when it comes to the biggest titles should tell you that innovation is, in our current environment, very dependent on competition. The very second companies start acting like a cartel, trying to split the user base into niches that are composed of fewer people but can be squeezed for more money per person, it's already over. They don't need to wow you anymore. Honestly, the best thing that can happen to us consumers is a constant, everlasting console war with no winners in sight. We are not going to see this change out of nowhere. It's not like they're going to risk money for no reason, and I get it. But I think there are new forces that are starting to join the industry, especially the home console industry. I know I'm making a mix of everything. The battery died. I'm aware that I'm mixing the hardware industry and the software industry in this entire discussion. I'm doing that on purpose because right now the two things are becoming more and more the same. The lines are more blurred than ever. And if you follow what these companies want, they don't want us to have any choice, any say in games. And they want to basically put in the least effort possible and make playing games on their platforms or their services that they're increasingly starting to do just a binary choice, either join or leave. And that's what's killing creativity, in my opinion. They have no reason to be creative. They can force you out of their system. I don't think innovation in the gaming industry is dead, but it's asleep. It needs to be woken up somehow. Maybe Valve joining the home console market now with some new and actually decent Steam machines will do that. So, editing room Femi here. I was right. As I was editing this, Valve just announced their new GameCube. So, good luck, Microsoft. Good luck, Sony. Good luck, Nintendo. Fight or die! You have no idea how it feels like to be 5 months late on a video project, only for Valve to be the one beating you in time. Fucking Valve. So what that ungrateful clone that I forced to edit my videos, I mean, what I just told you right now is actually correct. Valve just announced the GameCube and they have accidentally delayed this video because I was going to connect to the next part by hoping that the rumors about them joining the home market, the home console market, not the home market, they're not selling houses, were true. And they are. And I put a lot of trust in Valve. Of course, I'm not going to consider this a win already, but this should bring more competition. So we should be able to get something more from everyone in the game here. That's going to hopefully make those three change their ways. And so, connecting to the next part of the video, we've talked so far about all the reasons why it's so over. Let's talk about why we are so back. When I'm talking about cool UIs, I'm talking about cool presentation in a way that is not constrained by technical limitations, like, for example, having to work with sprites. So, of course, I'm talking about, I hope this works, or it's going to make me look very silly. This. What you're looking at right now is one of the original Sony PlayStation commercials, Mental Wealth, which is a very good example of peak weird Sony. And it's also from where and when I think cool UIs were born. I think they were born with the PlayStation. I think they were born because Sony, on the developer side, managed to give a better deal to them than Nintendo. Citation needed for later. They were able to craft their own market by not catering just to kids like Nintendo used to do, but to everyone. And they did that by actually creating cool stuff, including what I think are effectively the very first cool UIs. Sit tight and let's talk about when gamers finally started eating good. Metaphorically speaking, I don't know what you're eating. Sony launches the PlayStation in December of 1994 in Japan, and it's an instant success, so they're looking to expand in 95 internationally. They want to sell the PlayStation in the West. But one, they've never sold any game console before, and two, the West is not their home market, so they have to make sure they nail this, and to do that, they leverage their wide connections and knowledge about the music world and try to tap into what at the time was one of the pop culture centers of the world. And of course, I'm talking about the British video game scene in the early 90s is one of those things that really feel like lightning in a bottle. You got so many small studios made of devs that in the 80s literally learned how to code in their bedroom, making games for their home computer. And there's very little interference from corporates, so they are still connected to the whole demo scene and the hacking scene, and very important for the story, the alternative electronic music scene. So raves, ambient music, trance music. The government even starts banning
sounds wholly or predominantly characterized by the emission of a succession of repetitive beats.
From being played in public at night with 100 or more people present, they were trying to ban raves. It doesn't work, and it also indirectly gives us one of the most interesting EPs of all time, and it creates a Streisand effect. More and more people want to join this super interesting scene. What used to be strictly underground gets more and more commercial, and so the center of social life for a lot of people, especially young people, becomes the club. Tony sees what's going on and goes like, okay, we need to use this to sell people our mind-boggling effects grey box. And so already in 93, to plant their flag in the UK, they buy a pretty big player in the home computer gaming scene to turn them into a superstar. In an unspecified day in 1993, Nick Burcombe is playing Mario Kart and drinking a few beers, and he gets stuck on the last lap of the last track of the 150cc cup. You know how Mario Kart does that thing where it goes doubling the tempo of the music in the last lap to build up pressure? That's driving Nick mad, so he turns off the volume of the TV and gets one of his trance CDs, and it's the classic track Age of Love by, well, Age of Love. I wish I could play it here, but I can't. It's a classic trance track. So he puts on the music, gets back to his SNES, and he nails it. He's so hyper-focused, the colors of the Rainbow Road match perfectly with the music. This is the best gaming experience of his life, and he wishes everyone else could experience this at least once. 2 years later, he's working for this company named Psygnosis, and they're developers and publishers. They've been recently acquired by Sony, and they have access to early PlayStation hardware. So they start thinking about what could potentially be a game to launch the PlayStation with in Europe, maybe, perhaps. Welcome back to the real world. So, there are many ways I could explain to you how Wipeout happened, and this is not going to be a video about Wipeout, okay? I know it looks like it now, but it's not about the game itself. I don't have any nostalgia for Wipeout. I never played it before, like a few years ago. But I need to tell you this story to explain my theory. Nick Burcombe, pictured here, ends up hanging out with one of his colleagues, which is Jim Bowers. And they're hanging out at the pub, and they're talking about just cool stuff from their life, I guess. And so he mentions what he thinks is the best gaming experience of his life, the Mario Kart one we just talked about. Jim basically just goes, you know, we're already working on a concept for a futuristic racer kind of thing. I've actually just made a trailer for that. So in a stroke of genius, they take this trailer, they put some music by The Prodigy under it, and it just works. It's one of those moments where you go, dude. And eventually, after showing this to everyone in the office, they dude their way into everyone wanting to make whatever this was into a real game. Everyone, except one person, funnily enough, their music and sound effects guy, Tim Wright, which is not really into that kind of music. Until they basically grab him and take him to the dance floor, they give him substances, and after that he gets it. Right after this collective awakening that went from dude to an actual idea, Psygnosis is contracted to make a gameplay sequence of a futuristic looking game for the movie Hackers, and they just used this as like an excuse to basically just mock up this game. And eventually they turn all of this into a proper design document to make a proper game that could launch in Europe with the PlayStation. If you take a look at this original design document, it's very interesting because they nailed some stuff, like the design of the vehicles is very similar to what we got in the end, and also the music choice, even though it took ages for them to actually get labels to sign and actually license music, you gotta credit Wipeout for being one of the first games that actually made this normal. But it looks like to me the kind of vibe they wanted was something like Ridge Racer or Daytona USA in space. They were trying to stick to that. Psygnosis used to be huge in the 80s. They published games for everyone, they made games on their own. But as their new hire, Keith Hopwood, would make them notice, their aesthetics was still stuck in the 80s, even in the artwork that looked very old compared with the music CDs that the PlayStation game was going to sit next to in malls. It was going to compete with that, so why not hire someone that works in that scene, that makes sleeves or posters for the same kind of artist of which music will be featured in the game. And after checking out a lot of posters and sleeves, one name seemed to be the obvious choice, the Designers Republic, or TDR. In 1979, a teenager from Croydon named Ian Anderson moves up to Sheffield to study philosophy and, in his own words, because of the bands he liked. He would later describe Sheffield as a utopian industrial city fueled by industrial music and socialism. Once he's there, he starts managing some bands and eventually, completely self-taught, starts making flyers and sleeves for albums. While managing the band person to person, he starts making their artwork too, until eventually, with growing requests, he formalizes everything into the Designers Republic, a proper graphic studio, in 1986. He's quickly joined by a friend and sculpture student Nick Phillips, and the two joke about being a socialist Sheffield version of Gilbert and George. Let me Google who they are. Oh, people love TDR. TDR's art, especially electronic musicians. That cover art from Otaker that I've shown you a few minutes ago, that was made by TDR. I've seen people try to label TDR's art in so many different ways, inspired by Russian constructivism, pop art, anime retrofuturism, maximum minimalism, but what makes something unmistakably TDR is bright colors, confrontational messaging, and honestly a lot of irony. I would also add going overkill, because they go hard on everything they do. They never phone it in, which is something that I find very relatable. This video is taking 5 months for a reason. One of their most important formative relationships is with Warp Records, which is formed in 1989. They make the whole branding for them, and after carefully hearing what they wanted, they completely ignore the source material and make something cooler. Directly quoting an article on the Tribune about TDR, the client is always wrong. TDR will be happy to work with you, but never to the point where they accommodate you so much their work stops being TDR. This is the studio that would be in charge of creating the whole Wipeout universe. And if you're wondering, okay, how many people are willing to put up with them? Like, come on, Femi, we know you're woke and whatever, but aside from a few punk rock musicians, who's ever gonna work with them if they don't show the company paying them respect by licking their, by doing exactly what they want? Turns out, everyone. I have an art book here with a lot of their work, but not all of it. It's an A to Z book. It's not in chronological order by choice. They're trying to make you connect everything with everything else however you want. Recently, I found out that this bottle right here of Coca-Cola that I remember seeing in stores when I was a kid was made by them. They've worked a bunch with Aphex Twin, made the branding for Nickelodeon UK and Europe, made commercials for Pringles, posters for Nokia, and the Labour Party, which is why I'm not really censoring swears today, because we already have them in the art that I'm showing you. So we have mainstream stuff and obscure stuff like this box of electricity that was designed to be a prop in a commercial, or in Italy in 2005 there was an ARG channel launched by MTV Italy and Telecom Italia, designed specifically to confuse whoever was watching. There were no commercials, the name of the channel changed 3 times, it was a constant flux of weird short movies, art projects, and also stuff like
Dateci le lire, vi voglio le lire.
Someday I gotta make a full-blown video about weird European TV or something. The whole brand identity of this channel was made by TDR, and also the website. They worked on the Sony iBot Dog Collector's box set. They've called out Adobe way before it was cool. Second time we mentioned freehand today. If I had to tell you everyone they've worked with, we would be here all day long. They made a GTA logo, the original one, the first one. But let's finally get to Wipeout and the bigger discussion here, or I will never finish this video. Keeping in mind that in the 80s, being a nerd playing computer games was something seen as like very far from rave culture. Hold on, this was supposed to be a render representing TDR and Keith from Psygnosis on the other side, but TDR is 2 people, not 3. I would complain to my 3D animator, but that's me too! In order to get TDR on board, they offered them £10,000 and free PlayStations before the console came out. TDR starts faxing letters with all sorts of design proposals that go way beyond just making artwork. They take what was programmed, the F1 HUD, and completely strip it out and start changing everything, faxing the team new fonts made from scratch, role-playing as the chief of various teams in the Wipeout lore, and every team is basically representing pretty often the spirit of a country, but not always. I don't need to tell you where Aricom comes from or where Phasar comes from. You can tell from the color scheme, from the vibe. But what I love is that they went into so much detail. They're having a lot of fun, you can tell. You can tell that TDR joined after the project was started because the UI of the game, the first game specifically, is a weird mix between the most generic 90s stuff you'll ever see, like gradients and generic icons clearly taken from random asset CDs. And then you have the super cool slick TDR stuff, like the icons for the power-ups, all of the aesthetics of every single team, which was treated by TDR as a real company. They were doing branding work for totally fictional companies. I want to shout out to Michael Place here, which was working for TDR back then and worked a lot on Wipeout, and is also present as one of the people involved with the creation of Wipeout Futurism, the book that I'm using as a source here. And he talked about how they would take random obscure Japanese logos, change them a bit, and then use them inside Wipeout. There are 2 things outside of the UI that will change other UIs of other games forever, even before the next Wipeout games would come out. The cover art of the game, which definitely stands out, even among all sorts of music CDs, and the printed advertisement poster, which wasn't spared by the UK tabloids. Sony was totally okay with having Wipeout associated directly with club culture. They put PlayStation consoles inside clubs. They made Wipeout clubwear. This was just a continuation of that line. Fellow YouTuber Jordan HJ actually managed to reach out to Ian asking what this poster means, and the only answer he gives is speed. TDR became more and more involved with Wipeout as time went on, something you can clearly see looking at the UIs of the games. The second Wipeout, Wipeout 2097, also known as Wipeout XL, because according to Psygnosis, American players would not understand the concept of a game set in the future and would ask where the other 2096 games are, They said it, not me. It was supposed to be an expansion pack of sorts for the first game, but during the process of turning into a full-blown sequel, you can see that the more and more synced work of TDR and Psygnosis made the UI look so much better here. Finally, with Wipeout 3, TDR would actually take over the UI completely, and in 1999 would make one of the most beautiful looking UIs I've ever seen, period. This doesn't look one day old. While Wipeout and Wipeout 2097 do look like games from the 90s, this one looks like a game from the future today. Once they gave them full control over everything, they've truly created their masterpiece. Now, let's put that on hold for a second because I want to talk about how the saga here has managed to indirectly influence everything around it. There's a very good article by SYH on the uxdesign.cc blog here, which I suggest you read because it outlines what I think is Wipeout's biggest influence on the gaming industry. Quoting the article directly here, Wipeout redefined how to approach the art direction of a title completely. It really made other developers stop and think about the whole package of a title. Every element requires an adequate amount of attention to make the experience sing. If you make a timeline of the other games on the PS1, you can see them being gradually influenced by Wipeout's slick design, basically finally giving game studios the chance to make UIs and artwork that are not just filler for the gameplay, but an actual integral part of the game. I don't think you would have Ace Combat 3 or Ridge Racer 4 without Wipeout, and you definitely wouldn't have Call Me Cry Rally 2.0 or even Gran Turismo, because what Wipeout did was truly proof that when you're making a game, investing in a cool UI, investing in a cool art style, investing in something unique that is not just having the best graphics ever or the most impressive number of simultaneous NPCs on screen can really make your game stand out. Wipeout 3 would even go on to win the 1999 British Academy Interactive Entertainment Award for Best Design. I would love to be able to thank Sony for actually creating a competitive market back then and letting this happen, because this is what led to the cool UI staying power up until the early 2000s. Even Ford Racing 3 had a cool UI, but in fact they were among the first to forget about who really made this happen. In 1999, Sony would take full control over Psygnosis, which up until then was operating as a full independent studio even though they were owned by Sony. And when it came to making the next Wipeout on the PS2, instead of going to TDR and asking them to do everything like what would feel most logical, they tell them they gotta compete with other studios that never worked on the saga to get the privilege to maybe work on what they created, asking them to fight for the privilege to keep what seems rightfully theirs. Ian's answer? No thank you. Mission complete. Game over. Sorry for making you wait so long for this one. I had a lot of stuff going on in my life. No sponsors for today, so a huge thanks here to my Patreons for actually helping me pay my bills. And now I'll go take a nap. Bye bye!